He pretended to sleep, just to test a little boy's honesty inside his mansion. But in the next few minutes, he uncovered a secret that destroyed everything he believed about his own life. A hidden betrayal, a forgotten love, and a truth buried for 20 years that turned a billionaire's world upside down. What the maid's son whispered in that silent room was only the beginning. Because when the lights went out and the gun clicked in the dark, nothing would ever be the same again. The night smelled of rain, old wood, and burnt coffee. I lay silently on the leather couch in my mansion, pretending to sleep. My breathing was slow. My eyes stayed shut. But my mind was awake. For years, people loved my money more than they loved me. Partners betrayed me. Friends sold my secrets. Even my own brother once stole from me when I was sleeping on a factory floor at 19. That betrayal built the billionaire the world feared today. Cold, sharp, untouchable. Only one person ever softened my heart. Maria, my maid. She arrived years ago with worn shoes, trembling hands, and a little boy named Daniel. I still remember the smell of wet clothes when she first entered my office during winter. Her eyes carried exhaustion, but also dignity. She worked quietly, never complained, never begged. When my company nearly collapsed during the recession, everybody disappeared. Investors mocked me. Employees abandoned me. But Maria stayed. Some nights, she secretly left hot soup outside my office door because she knew I had stopped eating. And Daniel, that little boy, used to wait for her in the hallway, doing homework under dim yellow lights while I fought bankruptcy inside conference rooms. Years passed. I became richer than I ever imagined. Private jets, luxury towers, magazine covers. But pain never truly leaves a man who climbed from hunger. So that night, I decided to test the boy. I left my wallet open beside me. Inside was enough cash to change their lives forever. The room was silent except for the ticking clock and distant thunder outside the windows. Then I heard soft footsteps. Daniel entered slowly. He stopped near the couch. For a moment, nothing moved. Then his fingers touched the wallet. My chest tightened. The same disappointment I carried for years returned like poison in my veins. But suddenly, I heard him whisper with a trembling voice, "Mom worked too hard for this man when nobody cared about him. I will never betray him." Then something unexpected happened. I felt warm tears fall onto my hand. The boy was crying. And when I finally opened my eyes, I saw Maria standing at the door holding an old photograph that made my entire body freeze in shock. My throat went dry. The photograph trembled in Maria's hands. Old, faded, bent at the corners. But I recognized it instantly. A young woman stood beside a broken roadside fruit cart. And beside her was me, 20 years younger, thin, hungry, covered in engine oil from the garage where I once worked 16 hours a day. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Rain crashed harder against the mansion windows. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. Maria lowered her eyes. "I never thought you would remember," she said softly. Then she stepped closer. The scent of soap and rain followed her through the room. Daniel stood frozen beside the couch, confused by the tears running down my face. Maria carefully sat the photograph on the table. "That winter," she said, "you gave your only coat to a woman holding a sick baby outside the train station." My breath stopped. I remembered that night. The freezing wind, the empty pockets, the ache of hunger twisting inside my stomach. I had forgotten her face, but not the child crying in her arms. Maria looked toward Daniel. "That baby was him." The room became unbearably silent. I stared at the boy. The same boy I almost accused of stealing moments earlier. Shame burned through my chest like fire. All these years, while the world praised me as a self-made billionaire. I never realized the greatest investment of my life was one act of kindness I barely remembered. Daniel slowly wiped his tears. "You saved us," he whispered. Maria smiled painfully. "No," she said gently. "He reminded us that good people still exist." Her words shattered something inside me. For years, I believed success came from strength alone. But standing there, looking at the woman who cleaned my floors while hiding a lifetime of gratitude, I finally understood something deeper. Money built my empire, but compassion built my soul. Then suddenly, Daniel reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a sealed envelope. His hand shook violently. "Sir," he said, barely breathing, "there is something my mother never told you about your company, and about the man who betrayed you years ago." My fingers trembled as I took the envelope from Daniel. The paper felt old, fragile, like it had carried pain for many years. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Inside the mansion, nobody spoke. I slowly opened the envelope. A stack of documents slid onto the table. Bank transfers, property records, old signatures. Then I saw the name. My older brother. The same man who vanished after stealing money from me during the darkest season of my life. The air suddenly felt heavy. Maria lowered her eyes. "I wanted to tell you years ago," she whispered, "but you were already drowning in betrayal." Daniel stepped closer. "I found those papers hidden inside my late grandfather's garage," he said. His voice cracked with emotion. "My grandfather worked as a driver for your brother." I stared at him silently. Every memory came flooding back. Sleeping inside factories, skipping meals for weeks, working until my hands bled. And through all of it, I believed failure was my fault. But the papers revealed something horrifying. My brother had secretly sold my first company idea before I even launched it. He destroyed contracts, paid people to abandon me, spread lies that I was unstable and dangerous. My chest tightened painfully. All these years, the empire I built from suffering was born from a betrayal deeper than I imagined. I turned another page. Then suddenly my breathing stopped. There was a final document, a hospital payment receipt, paid anonymously, dated 20 years ago, the exact night my dying mother received emergency surgery. I looked at Maria in confusion. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Your brother did not pay for that surgery," she whispered. "I did." My entire body froze. I remembered standing outside that hospital helpless and broken because I had no money left. The doctors refused treatment. I thought some miracle saved my mother that night. But it was never a miracle. It was her, the woman who now cleaned my floors every morning in silence. I could not breathe properly anymore. "Why?" I asked weakly. Maria smiled through tears. "Because when everybody looked at me like I was worthless, you treated me like a human being." Daniel suddenly looked toward the mansion entrance. Fear appeared across his face. Then the massive front door slowly opened, and the man standing there made my blood run cold. My brother had returned. The room turned ice cold. My brother stood beneath the chandelier, soaked by rain. Older, thinner, broken by time. But I recognized those eyes instantly. The same eyes that watched me suffer without mercy years ago. Maria stepped protectively in front of Daniel. I slowly rose from the couch. Every scar from my past burned inside me at once. The sleepless nights, the hunger, the humiliation, all because of him. My brother looked around the mansion with trembling eyes. Then he looked at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking clock echoed through the silence like a warning. Finally, he whispered, "You became everything I tried to stop." His voice carried exhaustion instead of pride. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails cut into my skin. You destroyed my life, I said coldly. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the marble floor. No, he replied painfully. I destroyed my own. Something about his voice felt different. Not arrogant. Not cruel. Defeated. He slowly reached into his pocket and placed a small rusted key onto the table. I came to return what belongs to you. I stared at the key in confusion. Then my heart skipped violently. I knew that key. It belonged to the tiny storage locker where I once kept my first inventions, before they mysteriously disappeared. My breathing became uneven. You still have them? I whispered. He lowered his head in shame. I kept them hidden for 20 years. Daniel looked at me with wide eyes. Maria covered her mouth, already crying. My brother stepped forward carefully. I envied you, he admitted. You were stronger than me, kinder than me. His voice cracked apart. So I became the monster I feared. The anger inside me battled against something heavier. Pain. Because standing before me was no longer the powerful man who betrayed me. He looked like a soul punished by his own guilt for decades. Then suddenly, he collapsed to his knees. The sound echoed across the mansion. I do not have much time left, he whispered weakly. A terrible silence filled the room. I noticed how pale his skin looked, how violently his hand shook. Then he pulled medical papers from inside his coat. Stage 4 cancer. My chest tightened painfully, and before I could even process the shock, he looked toward Maria and said something that made the entire room freeze in disbelief. The company was never supposed to belong to me or my brother. It legally belongs to Daniel. The word struck me harder than any betrayal. Daniel stepped backward in confusion. Maria looked completely frozen. Even the storm outside seemed to fall silent for one impossible moment. What are you talking about? I asked slowly. My brother coughed painfully into his trembling hand. Then he looked toward Daniel with deep regret burning in his eyes. Your father, he whispered, was the real founder. The room spun around me. Daniel stared at him in shock. Maria's lips trembled violently. No, she whispered, but my brother nodded weakly. 20 years earlier, before wealth and fame poisoned our lives, I had a business partner, a brilliant mechanic named Samuel, a man with rough hands and the kindest heart I had ever known. We built our first machines together inside a tiny garage that smelled of oil, sweat, and burnt wires. Samuel believed success should help poor families, not just rich investors. He dreamed of building affordable technology for struggling workers. But one winter night, he disappeared suddenly. I was told he abandoned the company. I believed the lie for 20 years. My brother lowered his head in shame. He never abandoned you, he confessed. I paid men to force him away after he discovered I was stealing from the company. Maria broke down crying. Daniel stood motionless beside her. My heart pounded with unbearable force. Samuel, the man who once shared his last piece of bread with me during our poorest days. The man whose laughter carried hope through dark nights. I looked at Daniel again. Now I saw him differently. The same eyes. The same quiet strength. My brother swallowed painfully. Samuel signed the original ownership papers before he disappeared, he said. He left his shares to his unborn son if anything happened to him. Then my brother pointed toward Daniel. He never knew Maria was pregnant. The air left my lungs completely. Daniel's hand shook uncontrollably. I never met my father, he whispered. Maria covered her face, unable to stop crying. He died believing everybody betrayed him, she said softly. Guilt crushed my chest like stone. For years, I celebrated victories built on a lie I never questioned deeply enough. I became a billionaire, while the family of the man who helped build my dream lived in silence beside me. Then Daniel suddenly looked directly into my eyes. Not with anger, not with greed, but with heartbreaking honesty. "I do not want your money," he whispered. "I only want to know if my father was proud of me." Tears filled my eyes instantly. But before I could answer, the mansion lights suddenly went black. And somewhere inside the darkness, a gun clicked. Darkness swallowed the mansion instantly. Maria gasped. Daniel grabbed her arm protectively. I stood completely still, listening. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder shook the walls. Then came the sound again. Metal, cold, sharp. A gun being loaded somewhere inside the room. My brother's breathing became heavy beside me. "Please," he whispered into the darkness. "You followed me here?" A slow pair of footsteps echoed across the marble floor. My pulse exploded inside my chest. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. "You should have died quietly." I recognized that voice immediately. Victor Hale, the investor who nearly destroyed my company years ago. The same man who bought judges, threatened workers, and bribed officials to bury competitors. I had defeated him publicly 5 years earlier. Or at least, I thought I had. Lightning flashed through the windows for one brief second. I saw the outline of a gun pointed toward us. Maria held Daniel tightly. My brother suddenly stepped in front of me. His shaking body blocked the weapon. "Enough," he said painfully. Victor laughed coldly. "You finally grew a conscience?" My brother coughed violently. Blood stained his lips. "I helped you ruin innocent lives," he admitted. "But not anymore." The room fell silent again, except for the storm. I felt something strange rise inside me. Not hatred. Grief. Because the man I hated for decades was trying to protect me with a little life he had left. Victor slowly moved closer. "You should have stayed buried," he snarled. Then he pointed the gun toward Daniel. "That boy becomes the legal owner tomorrow if those documents reach the court." Maria cried out in fear. Every instinct inside me ignited instantly. I stepped forward. "Leave them out of this." Victor smiled darkly. "You built an empire," he said. "But you forgot the first rule of power. Power never forgives weakness." Those words struck me deeply, because for years, I believed them too. I sacrificed kindness for survival, love for ambition, trust for control. But standing there in darkness beside Maria and Daniel, I finally understood what real strength looked like. It was sacrifice. It was loyalty during suffering. It was choosing goodness after life gives you every reason to become cruel. Then suddenly, my brother turned toward me with tears in his eyes. And before I realized what he intended to do, he lunged directly at Victor. A deafening gunshot exploded through the mansion. Maria screamed. Daniel froze in horror. And as lightning illuminated the room once more, I saw my brother collapse onto the marble floor. The sound of the gunshot kept ringing inside my skull. For one horrifying second, nobody moved. Then Victor staggered backward as the gun slipped from his hand and crashed across the floor. My brother lay motionless on the cold marble beside him. Blood spread slowly beneath his body. Maria dropped to her knees in panic. Daniel stood frozen, his face pale with terror. Lightning flashed again. I rushed toward my brother and lifted his head into my trembling arms. His breathing was shallow, painful. Warm blood soaked through my sleeves. "Why?" I whispered brokenly. "After everything, why would you save me?" He looked at me weakly. For the first time in our lives, I saw no jealousy in his eyes. Only regret. "Because you were always the better man," he said softly. Tears burned down my face. The storm outside roared louder, as if the world itself was grieving beside us. Victor tried crawling toward the fallen gun, but Daniel suddenly stepped forward. The frightened boy who once studied under hallway lights now stood with unbelievable courage. He kicked the weapon far across the room. "Enough!" he shouted. His voice shook the silence. Victor stared at him with hatred. "You think kindness makes you strong?" he sneered. Daniel's chest rose heavily with emotion. "No," he replied, "but hate destroys everything." Those words pierced me deeply, because I finally understood the truth. I spent years building towers, companies, fortunes. But this young boy possessed something far more valuable. A clean heart. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Maria must have called the police during the chaos. My brother gripped my wrist weakly. "There is something else," he whispered painfully. His breathing became uneven. "There is a hidden account Victor never found." I leaned closer. "It belongs to the workers you lost during the recession, the families who suffered because of us." My eyes widened. "There is enough money to rebuild their lives," he continued. "Promise me you will use it." Emotion crushed my chest so heavily I could barely breathe. For years, success meant power to me. Now, kneeling beside my dying brother while rain battered the mansion windows, success suddenly meant responsibility. It meant healing the pain we caused. My brother slowly turned his eyes toward Daniel. Then he whispered something that made Maria break into tears again. "Your father would have been proud of the man you are becoming." Daniel covered his mouth, unable to speak. And just as the police lights began flashing through the windows, my brother reached into his coat one final time and pulled out a sealed letter addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the sealed letter. My mother's handwriting filled the page. Familiar, soft, alive again after decades. "I am proud of you both," it began. My vision blurred instantly. Maria knelt beside me, holding Daniel close as police lights painted the broken mansion in red and blue. My brother's breathing grew weaker. He forced a final smile. "Do not repeat our sins," he whispered. "Build something that heals people, not something that controls them." Then his eyes slowly closed. And this time, he did not open them again. Silence fell. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. The kind that changes a man forever. Days passed like a dream after that night. Victor was arrested. The truth finally came out. My empire was no longer just mine. It belonged to every worker we once ignored, every family we once hurt, every dream we once crushed. I stood outside the rebuilt factory months later. Daniel stood beside me in a simple shirt, no longer a maid's son in the shadows, but the rightful heir of something greater than wealth. Maria smiled quietly, watching him. For the first time in my life, I felt no hunger for more money, only peace. Daniel looked at me and asked softly, "Where do we go from here?" I looked at the sky. Clear. Endless. And I finally understood. "We go where kindness is needed most," I said, "because true success is not measured by what you own, but by how many lives you lift when you finally have the power to do so." Maria placed her hand in mine. Daniel stood between us like a bridge between pain and hope. And in that quiet moment, I realized the richest man is not the one who has everything, but the one who learns, too late or not, to use everything he has, to heal the world that once broke him.